Hi everyone, welcome to THT and welcome to my first in-depth deck tech for Legend of the Force. And today we are going to talk about a deck that is, in my opinion, relatively overlooked and, in my opinion, a possible answer to the current best deck in the format. This video is sponsored by Card Market, the best marketplace to buy and sell cards in Europe. So without further ado, let's get into the list. As you can see here, this is my Gar Saxon list. Traditionally, Gar Saxon has been played in yellow because yellow provides you with some of the best shielded units in the game: 7th Fit Defender, Crafty Smuggler, Shin Hati, even the newest ones. And what I found with Gar Saxon Yellow is, with Legend of the Forces deck, contrary to popular belief, I don't think the deck got a lot better than it used to be. And the reason for it is very simple, is because it's not really getting anything that it didn't already have. You're getting more 2-drop, more 3-drops. It's not really getting tools that are really bringing the deck to the next level. It's simply just getting more of the same. So I decided to go to a radically different direction from any other Gar's list, and basically playing this as green instead of playing in yellow. I also saw some people playing double blue, which also got a lot better with the expansion, but I believe that the burst version of it is energy conversion lab, and the reason for it is because, of course, of the combination between Darth Vader and ECL. So the starting point of this deck was kind of thinking about recognizing that Darth Vader ECL was probably one of the strongest combination in the entire game. The ability to completely kill two very large units, regardless their space on the ground, and leave behind a relatively large body. That combination to me is very much worth building around. And I found that this combination, as good as it is in decks such as Krennic ECL, Kira ECL, or even decks like Kylo ECL, meaning the new Kylo Ren ECL, I don't think it's as its best in a control deck. I think it's as its best in a mid-range or in an aggro deck. And the reason being is because playing a 25 HP base whenever you're playing control is a huge deal. So either you have to be playing Data Vault, in which case you can run Darth Vader in combination with Stamina Intervention, but you're making the combination extremely inconsistent, or you're playing ECL and then you start the game with 8 less HP than normal, which in my opinion, whenever you are playing a defensive deck, is a very big deal. Keep in mind that aggressive decks will care less about starting with fewer life total than other decks. And if you want to be playing an aggro deck in that color combination, you don't really have that many options, because 2-drops in that color combination are really bad. But obviously there is a leader out there that can turn your bad 2-drops into very strong 2-drops, and that's obviously Gar Saxon. So this is the result of this idea is an aggressive deck that really fights for the board, as opposed to a deck like Kylo Ren, who's trying to really kill the opponent before he gets to do anything, or a deck like Sabine, which will put tremendous pressure and then finish the game with out-of-hand damage, like a Wrecker Ambush with tons of Overwhelm, or for a cause I believe in, or even the Sabine Pang. This deck is radically different because it needs really to dominate the board to win, to take over the game, even more so than a deck like Sabine. But it has a really amazing tool to do that. First of all, of course, because of most of the units in the decks are shielded, it has extremely sticky thread that are difficult to get off the board. And the second major advantage that it has is obviously this insane mid-game combination with Vader that allows you to really completely reclaim the board. But the deck has other tools that are very powerful to claim the board, like obviously Overwhelming Barrage, Craving Powers are excellent removals that will boost your aggressivity as well as dealing with enemy units. And so the deck I think is really powerful. Even if you don't happen to draw the Vader, which you are likely to do, especially if the game goes a little bit long, you're gonna find yourself with a deck that is really capable to put a tremendous amount of pressure and really able to take over the board. And I think this is probably the correct direction to go whenever you want to be fighting in a mid-range deck. So mid-range deck have this ability to really block the game, notably with Chirrut, or will be able to kill your units with False Throw. This deck does not suffer from those weaknesses. And I think in the current meta, this might be one of the best way to approach the aggro matchup, unless you really want to go the route of kind of ignoring the opponent by either playing Kylo Ren, so meaning the Kylo Ren 2, Kylo 2 aggro, or you want to go full space with Vader 4. If you really want to engage with the opponent and interact with the opponent, but you want to kill them and be aggressive, I think Gar ECL is a very, very strong option. We get a little bit into the details of this when we talk about the matchups, but let's get first about the main idea. So the main idea of the deck is you're going to be placing either a unit on the ground, which is going to be shielded and put a lot of pressure on the opponent, so 3/2 shielded, or you're going to be putting a space unit, and then you're going to be putting an upgrade on the space unit on turn 2, or you're going to be playing a 3 drops shielded again, and really establish yourself with strong board presence. So this is kind of classic turn 1, turn 2 play. With that being said, you don't even need, there are even more powerful openings that you can make with this deck, which we'll get into the details as we go into the card by card analysis. And then obviously once you've established that board domination, you keep the control of the board, you manage the opponent threat using Barrage or Craving Powers, and then you get into that crucial turn 5 where you get your Gar Saxon deployment and you get your Vader ECL combo. You completely wipe the opponent board, and then from that point you have complete domination of the board, you deal tremendous amount of damage, and you're able to finish the game with them all. That's kind of like the ideal gameplay flow for this deck. So let's get into the card by card analysis, starting off of course with the leader. So what is great about Gar Saxon? So Gar Saxon's main weakness, and I said it before, I say it again, is its stats for its cost. 4/7 for a 6 deployment leader is not ideal, it's not good at all, but Gar Saxon makes up for that with his leader's ability, which I think is one of the best leader abilities in the game, because it gives +1 attack to every single unit in your deck, pretty much. And that ability makes it so normally this color combination is very, very bad to drop. Well, this is a way you can get yourself some really, really good to drop. So if you want to play aggressive in that color combination, you basically have no other choice but to play Gar Saxon, at least right now. And in my opinion, as I said, it's really in the kind of aggressive decks where you're going to be able to get the best out of the new Vader. So great leader ability, pretty bad leader deployment. Do not forget though about the when defeated ability. It's very useful whenever you put a Craving Power on Gar Saxon or you place a Darksaber on him. Having the ability to return that card into your hand whenever he dies is actually pretty handy. So do not forget about his secondary ability to take the best out of him. The other card that is going to be our base is going to be Energy Conversion Lab. So as I said earlier, the deck being the aggressive deck doesn't care as much about having less HP than his opponent, but it makes up for this by having itself some extremely powerful swingy play with Ambush. So the way I usually like to use ECL in this matchup, so if I'm playing a slower matchup, I usually would like to keep my ECL for Vader. And this way, obviously this is the strongest play you can possibly make, and this can completely turn a game upside down. Even if you're very far behind, an ECL ambush can completely turn you back in the game. But obviously there are certain decks where using ECL earlier in the game can be very, very good. And in this case, there's plenty of great ECL targets. So even ECL, something like an Hatorim Headhunter is a 4/3 shielded. You can kind of kill a 4 health units and stick a 3/3 on the battlefield. Or even in space, being able to ECL a shielded unit, kill an enemy unit, and then put the shield afterwards. there's great ways to use ECL earlier in the game. So this is kind of the two ways I like to use ECL. So against aggro, using ECL relatively early to get yourself a tremendous advantage is very strong. And if you're playing against mid-range, I usually like to keep ECL against 4 for Vader, unless I find a really better use for it later on. But I would say 80% of the time I will use, or 80 to 90% of the time I will use ECL for Vader. Keep in mind that even if you use ECL, you still have great ways to use Vader, because we do play 2 copies of Timely Intervention in the deck. So, moving on now to the 2 drops, we obviously have Director Krennic, which is amazing in this deck for all the good reasons. Is going to be a 3/2 shielded for 2, which is obviously an amazing ratio. And his ability to reduce the cost of card with when defeated is very relevant in this deck. We play 6 2-drops that have a when defeated effect that we can play for turn 1, so we can go Director Krennic turn 2, turn 1, and then turn 2 we can play a 2-drop, and then we can play a 2/3 that has a when defeated effect alongside it to really swarm the board and really put a lot of pressure on your opponent. This also allows us to play the Shuttle 149 as early as turn 2, which can be very powerful because we're talking about a 4/4 shielded card in space, which is once again a lot of pressure. So it's it's the best 2-drop you could possibly have on turn 1, most of the time, I would say. Slightly worse than Director Krennic, but tremendously important for the deck, is Secretive Sage, which is going to be another 3/2 shielded. I think this is probably the number 1 card besides Vader that makes this deck possible. Basically, one of the reasons why it was very difficult previously to play a Gar Saxon that was not playing yellow is because you wouldn't have enough turn 1 plays that are powerful with the leader. But with Secretive Sage, this problem is fixed. So, because now we get yourself a second great 2-drop on the ground. Slightly worse than Krennic because it doesn't have the passive ability, but to be fair, the most important, of course, is the 3/2 shielded body. In space, we got the Inferno 4. We're playing an aggro deck, so having the possibility to arena dodge our opponent is very good. Inferno 4 ability to be able to filter the top 2 cards of your deck is actually more important in an aggro deck than it is in a control deck, in my opinion, because this, of course, allows you to make sure that you are going to be playing on curve. It also has the when defeated ability, meaning that you can play it for a discount with Krennic. And obviously the main advantage of Inferno 4 is the fact that it is a vehicle, so we're going to have a lot of synergies with vehicle in this deck. Being able to go Inferno 4 turn 1 into Aiden Versio turn 2 is a very powerful play against a high number of decks that are not capable of just killing a 6/6 shielded unit in space, and that could put a tremendous amount of pressure on his opponent. Is one of the best opening on the deck is your off Inferno 4 into Aiden Versio, and the when played ability can allow us to find this combo even easier than normal. Slightly worse than Inferno 4, but pretty much does the same thing, is the Onyx Squadron Brute. It does have a when defeated effect once again, just like so it can be played for a discount with Krennic, and the little heal on the base can be handy sometimes, but the main asset is obviously to be a 2-drop in space that we can take advantage of with Aiden Versio or other pilot that we're running in the deck. Once this thing has a pilot, it gets the +1 attack bonus from a Gar Saxon. Next we got our best 3-drops in the deck. This is Outer Rim Outlaws, which is going to be simply just a 4/3 shielded for 3, which is just completely insane. Like, it's a lot of pressure and it's not easy to deal with, and even if the shield get knocked off, we still remain with a 3/3 behind, which is not bad at all. And it's actually relatively a good amount of stuff that allows us to put a shield back or to put an experience token on him so he can once again regain his +1 attack bonus. So just a very solid card in this deck. Slightly worse in an optic of an aggro deck, but not far behind, is the Client. Then the Client is going to be a 3/5 shielded for 3, which is just insane by itself. The ability to place bounty on stuff is not often relevant, but can be, so do not forget that this ability exists, because this could save your life, especially in the mirror of aggro. But overall, it's just a great card, 3/5 shielded. If you're running against a deck that has access to Anakin or Talzin Assassin, playing the client instead of the Outer Rim Outlaws can be a good play, because the client does not get shut down by the -3/-3. So that's very positive. So this is something that you got to be mindful. It depends on what you're playing against. I think the option to play something a little bit tankier instead of something that has less attack can be really worthwhile. Another 3-drop, which is not really a 3-drop, is the Wingman Victor 3, which is a tech that was suggested to me by another Gar Saxon player that I played against. Basically, what I like about this one is that it is a nice curve filler, like a 1-drop that you can place in the curve whenever you are running 2-drop turn 1, 2-drop turn 2. You can basically play this on the pilot and give an experience token to another unit. That's just extremely good value to give 2 basically upgrades basically for the cost of 1. For basically 1 resource, you put 2 upgrading on the board is really, really good. And even if you have to play it as a 3-drop, it's not terrible. Like a 4/3 for 3 in an aggro deck is not horrible, especially if you have a way to shield it later on to make it a 5/3 shielded, which this deck can do. So, in my opinion, one of the best opening you can do in this deck is like you go turn 1, 2 drops, and then you go, so turn 1, something like an Onyx Squadron Brute, or an Inferno 4. Then turn 2, you can place the Wingman Victor 3 on it for the +1/+1 bonus, which in fact will be a +2/+1. No, first you put another 2-drop, and then you play the Wingman, you put an experience token on the 2-drop, and then you put the +1/+1, which will be a +2/+1 on that space unit, and then you do attack. So it's those can give you some extremely explosive and powerful turn 2 plays that can be very mighty. So Aiden Versio is gonna be another. So this card is often going to be a 3-drop, because often you want to play for the piloting, but if you want to play it as a 4-drop, it's completely acceptable. It gets himself a 5/3 for 4. She became a standard of every single Gar Saxon deck, because the flexibility of boosting, basically giving a +4/+3 attack bonus for only 3 resource and a shield to a space unit is just completely absurd. And even if your opponent knocked out the shield, because she's an upgrade herself, she still gives a +4/+3 to whatever it's equipped on. And for me, she's the primary reason why we are playing so many space units on turn 1 in this deck. And the fact that she can be played as a grind unit as a 5/3 shielded on 4 is just incredible. She's also a really good ECL target. If you're playing against aggro and you are in emergency to deal with something, Aiden Versio will do that just fine. Then we got Lompike. So Lompike is more of the grindy card, more of for the more controlling matchup because of his smuggle. What is really great about him, of course, is the fact that once he gets to attack, he becomes a 5/6. So 5/6 for 4 is just an absurd stat line. Yes, you gotta give a shield to another enemy unit, but that's not really that big of a deal most of the time, because you're either going to be playing a hard removal that can get rid of it, or you're just going to ignore it because you're playing an aggro deck after all. And the fact that it can be smuggled for 5 is really an icing on the cake that really is going to be super helpful against all those 4-throw decks that really love to discard your cards. Lompike will do very, very well. Next we got the Shuttle ST-149. This card is incredible in this deck. It can be played for 3 if you got the Krennic, the classic turn 1 Krennic, turn 2 Shuttle. Secretive Sage and shielded units on turn 1. I'm anticipating I'm going to see a lot of play in this set, so being able to steal a shield to the opponent can be absolutely backbreaking. And it's a 4/4 for 4 shielded in space, which is just really, really solid. Regardless of whether you get the ability off or whether or not you get the discount for Krennic. And it's once again another space unit in which you can equip the Wingman Victor 3 or the Aiden Versio. Next, we're jumping directly into the 6-drop. We don't play any 5-drop units in this deck, because most of the time on turn 4, we're either going to be playing a 4+1, or we're going to be playing a Barrage or a Craving Power. So as far as unit is concerned, we are jumping directly to the 6/4. My opinion, the most important card of the deck, which is obviously Darth Vader. This card is incredible. So if people don't know the combo, the idea, of course, is to give this card ambush, so you can basically attack with it. With the when play ability, you will give a shield to an enemy unit, and then on the same motion, you will basically get your own attack. It's very important that you get the when play ability first, and then the on attack after, and then the trigger the ambush after. So order the trigger correctly. And this way you can basically kill. So the unit that is shielded will be destroyed, and then you can ambush into something else. So there's two different ways to use it. So you can, if there's only one unit on the field, you can simply just ambush that unit and kill it, which is not the best way to use it, but it works. The problem is if your opponent has a space unit and you don't have any ground units to ambush into, then that doesn't work. However, if your opponent has either 2 ground units or 1 ground unit and 1 space unit, then you ambush the smaller ground unit with 6 attack, because you get the +1 attack bonus from Gar Saxon, so you can actually ambush stuff that have 6 health and kill them. And then you can basically defeat something of any size, whether it's on ground and space, with the on attack ability. And then you'll be left behind with a 5/6, which is incredible. So yeah, it's just absolutely insane. Sometimes you can just play it as a 5/6 for 6 without the ambush, but this is really one of the cards in the game that benefit the most from the from ambush by far, and it just completely swings the game, killing 2 very large units and leaving a 5/6 on the board for 6 resource on curve is just disgusting and very difficult to come back from for the opponent. And this will happen, of course, very often, and your odds of actually drawing Vader on turn 5 whenever you're playing a 50 card deck and you have 3 copies of Vader is actually very significant. Your odds of actually pulling that off are actually very high. So if you draw Vader any later than this, you can always do the same play on 7 with Timely Intervention, or doing the play on 8 if you have smuggled Timely Intervention earlier. So just an incredible card in the deck, as you can imagine. Then, last but not least, as far as the units in the deck, we got Maul for 7. So Maul will act as basically our finisher. If you're playing green-black in a relatively aggressive deck, Maul is just excellent because it will allow you to ambush into a very damaged unit and deal a lot of damage overwhelm. So there's 2 main ways to use Maul. Is either you use it to get rid of a very large unit and leave behind a very big threat, or you use it to ambush into a very weak unit to deal tons of overwhelm damage and usually finish the game or just put your opponent into a tremendous amount of pressure. So if you're playing aggro and you're playing into that color combination, most than likely you want to play Maul. Going into the non-unit cards, we have 2 copies of Timely Intervention with a 3rd one in a sideboard. This is obviously to combine with Vader, but this can obviously be used in a number of different ways. Sometimes doing a Timely Intervention into a true drop on turn 2 can be very effective, and this allows to basically get yourself ahead of the board without having to use your ECL. So bear in mind sometimes to use Timely Intervention instead of ECL, so then you can keep so you can actually keep your ECL use for your larger units. It's just an incredible card, very strong, especially in those slower matchup where having to pay 1 extra for Vader or 2 extra for Vader is not that big of a deal. Moving on, we got a card that you might be surprised to see. This Cover the Wings. This card is just excellent in this deck. It gives us another space unit in which we can put an upgrade on. So let's say we open up with a 2/3 in space, like of Inferno 4. Then on turn 2, we can go Cover the Wing on that Inferno 4, turn it into a 3/3 shielded, then attack, and then we can play the wing, the Victor 3 wing, and then play this to equip the X-Wing to turn the X-Wing into a 4/3 in space. So you can really play the space game with this deck. And as I said, playing an aggro deck and having the ability to kind of shift around into space can be very, very useful, and this deck is capable of doing that. So play 2 Cover the Wings is a little bit more situational, so that's why I only played 2 of them, but I think it's really strong. It's a really strong card. Obviously, can be used on your ground units. Very strong against aggro, especially after Sideboard, because after Sideboard we play a lot of Sentinels, so we are able to shield those Sentinels and make the life of aggro decks very, very hard. Then we got a card that is notably most likely just a control card, but Peril of the Dark Side. So Peril of the Dark Side has 2 main assets in this deck. The first one is that he has the ability to deal with stuff that normally we wouldn't be able to deal with. So stuff like, for example, Gungi into General's Blade. That kind of plays is very dangerous to do against us because we have 3 copies of Peril of the Dark Side in the deck. So we can punish this very, very hard. So this will obviously have a psychological impact on our opponent, where he's going to have to think whether we have this kind of play or not, and have to play around them. It's a really, really excellent removal, and whenever people play against an aggressive deck, they have a tendency to not be really able to play around power. They would rather take initiative rather than play like a small unit to cover Power Dark Side. They don't play against Power Dark Side as much whenever they are playing against an aggro deck. So it's really, really an amazing asset for this deck. Moving on, we got obviously Overwhelming Barrage. This card has a lot of very high attack units that are also shielded, so this is an excellent card of this deck because we have very sticky threats that will be excellent bodies to play Barrage on. This allows us to obviously deal with opponent threats, as well as giving them an attack bonus that will allow them to push more damage. So really excellent card. The only problem with Barrage in this deck is obviously our 6 deploy leader. The fact that leader deploys on 6 is a bit counter-synergistic with Barrage, but as I said, we have a lot of sticky threats, so we usually get to use Overwhelming Barrage on 5 relatively consistently. Then we got Hotshot DR44 Blaster. This is played out of aspect. 5 cost for an effect like this is definitely overpriced, but this has won me so many games, especially, of course, whenever we are playing. And the way I use this is as a finisher. I use this as a way to finish the game, the last bit of damage that I need to finish a game. This is definitely the biggest inconvenience of playing the green versions where we don't have access to a discounted DR44 Blaster, but Blasters is still an amazing card out of aspect, as once again you play this as a finisher, you play this as a way to kind of deal the last little bit of damage, because it will basically be a +3 attack out of nowhere from your small goals, so you don't even need to keep it in your hand. So it's a card that will obviously deal a bunch of damage, and also allows us to trigger the +1 attack bonus of your leader. So it's a really, really strong card that won me a lot of games, and it's only as a one-of, because it's really as a very specific moment in the game where we need it, but especially if you're playing against control, like a long drawn out games, having this little punch of damage is going to make the difference between you winning and losing in quite a few games, and it's definitely worth the slots. Moving on, we got 1 copy of the Dark Saber, a bit more of a situational card in this deck. Once again, the fact that we have a leader that deploys on 6 makes the Dark Saber not as good as it would be, of course, in a Sabine deck, but there's still, of course, situations where having the options to drop his Dark Sabers on your leader and just swing for 1,000,000 damage is just very powerful. So having that option and having your opponent fearing that option can be very useful. So I have 1 copy of Dark Saber for that exact reason. Keep in mind, of course, that if you're playing a Dark Sabers on Gar Saxon and Gar Saxon gets killed, you get the Dark Sabers back into your hand, which is very relevant. Then we got Craving Power. So I've already explained why I think Overwhelming Barrage is very strong in the deck, while Craving Power is good for the exact same reason. What I love about Craving Power, of course, is the fact that it has the +2/+2 permanent, and it counts as an upgrade, which means that it will also give a +1 attack bonus. So let's say you're playing Craving Power on your leader, so his leader is 4 attack, 5, 6 attacks, it will be 7 attack with Craving Power, so you can snipe an enemy leader whenever you deploy your leader, which is just incredible. Yeah, so this is basically the list. let's do a couple of mulligan to see what kind of so this is a really good example of like an opening hand that I would definitely keep. So there's different ways you can run this. So if you're playing a deck that you think has no answer to Infernal 4 plus Aiden, the play is to go Infernal 4 turn 1 and then equip it an Aiden on it. So if you're playing against someone that doesn't play Power Darkside, that doesn't play Waylay, that kind of thing, this can be probably the way you want to run this out. Another play that I think is really strong and less all-in that you will play around this a bit better is turn 1 Secretive Sage, and then turn 2 Wingman into Infernal 4, and then put the experience. So turn 2 Infernal 4, or you can actually go Infernal 4 turn 1, and then turn 2 Secretive Sage, plus Wingman, boost the Infernal 4, give an experience to Secretive Sage. And that's another really, really strong opening you can do. So here you got at least your 2 first turns well covered. You probably want to resource the Maul and the Long Pike in this case. Long Pike, of course, has Smuggle, and Maul is obviously a little bit too early. So this is really an excellent opening hand. So let's draw another one. Okay, this hand will be a mulligan. We got no turn 1 play. So the deck plays 12 a turn 1 play, plus the Cover the Wing can also be played on turn 1. It's obviously very underwhelming. So we got 12 turn 1 we're very happy playing in, and we have Cover the Wing, which can add as like a 14. So the deck is really consistent. Okay, this opening hand is excellent. We got turn 1 Chronic into turn 2 Shuttle ST-149. If the Chronic gets dealt with, we can play the Outer Rim Outlaws on turn 2. In this case, we'll probably resource... okay, it depends on the matchup. There's some matchup where Barrage is better. There's some matchup where Craving Power is better. Most likely, Barrage is better, but there's some situation where that can be the other way around. So I would either resource one of the two, and I would definitely resource one of the 2 shuttles. Okay, next hand. So this is once again a great hand for the same reason as the first one we saw. We got ourselves a turn 1 Infernal 4, turn 1 Wingman plus Secretive Sage. If the turn 1 gets dealt with, you can play the Client instead. In this case, if you think that your opponent can easily shut down your turn 1 play, I would definitely not resource the Client. If your opponent cannot, you're not confident your opponent can shut down your turn 1 play, then you can resource the Client. So that allows you to keep a Barrage. Because otherwise the plan is to... So you either smuggle Client plus Barrage, or Barrage plus... or Client plus Shuttle, basically. Depending on what your opponent can do to your turn 1 play. Okay, last hand. This one is obviously a mulligan. Okay, and this one is just a really solid hand. We don't have any pilots, so we're probably going to resource the Inferno 4. So we're going to go turn 1 Secretive Sage. We probably want to resource... so here you have the 2 choices. You either can resource the Power Darkside or the Over Barrage. You almost never want to resource the Vader unless you really, really have to. It's such an important card to have. So keep it as long as you can, basically. So here on turn 2 is like, it really depends. If you really think you're going to need Power Darkside, you can keep Power Darkside as an option, and then you can resource the Overwhelm Barrage alongside the Inferno 4. But if you think you're not going to need Power Darkside, that 99% you're going to be playing Outer Rim Outlaws on turn 2, then you can resource the power, get the Inferno 4, and keep your Barrage for the turn 5. Keep in mind that we play 3 Barrage and a Craving Power, so on turn 5 we're most likely going to have something, but there's always a risk that you might not find something to play on 5. So here, I would say, depending on if you think you're going to need power or not, either resource power plus Inferno 4, or Inferno 4 or Overwhelm Barrage. Okay, so I think that's enough for now. Let's go back to the slide, to the deck list. So, yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the matchups. So basically, overall, the matchup for this decks is that it's really, really strong against mid-range. The reason why it's so strong against mid-range is because we have excellent tools to deal with mid-range. Power Darkside is really strong against mid-range. Darth Vader is insane against mid-range. We have this great ability to kind of stay on the board, and I think it's now most of the mid-range deck are going to be Force decks that are going to be using 4th Throw. And this deck is really, really strong against 4th Throw because we have almost all of our units are shielded, so we don't really care about 4-throw too much. 4-throw, we're almost like just going to get rid of a shield, which is not really that powerful against us. So my opinion is that if you want to play a deck that can beat the 4-throw mid-range decks, I strongly advise you to play this, because I've playtested those matchups a lot. And this deck really does extremely well against that type of decks. They can draw a million card with Kia di Mundi. They can, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because it's still a very tempo-focused matchup, where your card advantage doesn't matter. It's all about being able to get taken over the board, and this we are capable of doing that much better than they can. Another great thing as well is the consistency and the redundancy of the different options. If he opens up, we have some of the best turn 1 play against Ogdo Bogdo. Ogdo Bogdo 5-3, this deck does it very well against, because we play both Chronic and Secretive Sage. One of the ways those hand to blue decks can usually race an aggro decks is by basically playing Ogdo Bogdo turn 1, but we have amazing answers against that. So it just, I think it's a very solid deck against mid-range, and specifically against force mid-range deck, which are going to be a very strong force to be reckoned with in the meta. So if you want to find a deck that is fun to play with, and I can beat those decks, I think this is a strong option. Against aggro, it really depends on the type of aggro decks we're playing against. The deck can struggle a little bit against Sabine, that's why we have we have some really solid answers in sideboard for that, which I'll get over afterwards. And then finally, I think the prime against Sabine is like, it's a 25 HP base, so that can be, and the fact that we have a late deployment, Gar Saxon deployment is a problem in this matchup. The deck does really well against Vader 4, because we have a lot of space interaction to deal with this stuff, and then we get into Barrage to really swipe his board and do very well. So I think the deck is really does really well against Vader 4 in general. And then finally, so the main weakness of the deck, so soft control is okay, because against soft control, Darth Vader can once again be really useful. Like soft control is closer to mid-range decks, so against soft control we can do very well. This deck is really bad against hard control. The reason why it's really bad against hard control is because ECL Vader basically gets hard control is irrelevant. So the strongest asset of our deck to be able to claim the board is really not that useful against hard control. And the fact that our units are shielded is completely irrelevant against hard control, because they play basically only hard removal for the most part. So the deck is really bad against hard control, but to be fair, I don't think people are going to be playing hard control in this meta, because it gets countered so hard by those mid-range Kia di Mundi value decks that we've talked about. So a little bit about the sideboard here. So against aggro, my sideboard is going to be mostly Lieutenant Charleston and Super Commando squads. This gives us excellent Sentinel units that basically will block the board, and at the same time swing for a million damage into base. And we have ways to give them, with the Cover the Wing, we have ways to actually give them shields to make them even more difficult to play against. So Lieutenant Charleston in this deck is never going to be a 6/6 for 4, because it's we're playing pretty much every single turn on curve. However, it can easily be a 6/5 for 4, or a 5/4 Sentinels for 4. And even like 5/4 Sentinels for 4 is really good, guys. Like it's basically the same as I forgot a Jedi Sentinel stat line, which is a card that is, in my opinion, an almost auto include if you're playing a false deck in yellow. So 5/4 Sentinel is just really good. So if that's really the bottom line for this card, that's really amazing. And so obviously most of the time it's going to be a 6/5 for 4 Sentinels, and some rare occasion it might be a 7/6 for 4. So it's really just an excellent card against aggro, as a way to block the board completely and shut things down. Super Commando Squad acts as like another layer of Sentinels that comes into play. Basically, turn 4 and turn 5 is really the moment in the game where we are the most vulnerable in those matchups, because that's the moment where we don't have yet our leader deployment, and basically all we need to do is survive up until we get to the Gar Saxon flip, because once we get the Gar Saxon flip, we can flip Gar Saxon, we can ECL Vader if we still have ECL available, and we can really start going to town. So this line of play here really will help us kind of survive up to the Gar Saxon deployment, in which we can completely stabilize the game. Moving on against this is our anti-grindy matchup kind of cards. We play more copies of Timely Intervention for the late game. We play some Vaders as some staying power just to kind of repopulate the board. And have more copies of Dark Sabers, which I think are really, really strong against people who don't expect it. So yeah, the second copies of Dark Sabers can really come handy. So yeah, so as far as the matchup is concerned, as I said, I think the deck is really strong against against mid-range. It's good against aggro, especially after sideboard. And it's okay against soft control, it's bad against hard control. That's sort of how I would kind of categorize the deck. So just before we get into our other consideration, just so let you know, you can actually pick up Vader on card market for 26 euro. It's currently the most expensive card, and the most mechanically unique card in the set. So yeah, it's expensive, but it's obviously the key of the deck. You cannot, if people ask me, is there any like budget version of that deck? There is none, because regardless, you're gonna need to play the Darth Vader. If you're not playing Darth Vader in this deck doesn't make any sense in my opinion. Other considerations for the deck. So in the optic, of course, of a Gar ECL aggro deck, those are the other card that I would consider playing. The first one is the Snowtrooper Lieutenant, which obviously is really good at pushing damage. This color combination has a big inconvenience, is like it doesn't have many ways to get like buff spells to kind of push more damage into the base. And Snowtrooper Lieutenant does fix that issue. I just find it a little bit too inconsistent because we play a significant amount of cards that are not Imperials. So as good as it is, it has just been a little bit too inconsistent for me. Then we had X-Wolves, which is a card I really thought was going to make the cut in the deck. But it turns out that once ever it loses its shield, it just becomes a 2/2, and that just doesn't do anything. So Axe can be really powerful if you can place a lot of upgrades on him and really abuse his ability. But if you're just running it as another copy of Outer Rim Outlaws, it just doesn't do as well, because as soon as he loses shield, he becomes completely useless, which is really not ideal. So he's basically a worse version of Outer Rim Outlaw, and it turns out between Outer Rim Outlaw, the client, and Iden Versio, we just run enough 3-drop that we don't need to run him. Next, we got Evidence of Crime. If we end up into a meta where people play lightsabers all over the place, this might be a card that you might want to consider. So this is kind of more of a meta consideration. Next, we got Traitorous, which is another meta consideration. If you are in a meta where people don't run any upgrade removal, Traitorous might be a really strong option. Keep in mind that you're allowed to steal the unit, and the unit will be upgraded, which means you also get the +1 attack bonus from Gar Saxon from the unit you stole. So you're basically stealing an enemy unit, and you're also making that unit more powerful at the same time, which is really, really nice. Next, we got a Count Dooku, which can be another option for 7-drop. Comes to play, kill something in space. I think it can be useful if you're looking for more 7-drop that interacts with space. And it will leave you with a 6/4 shielded, which is nice. And then finally, we got Gideon Ask. So the reason why I've run a lot of Gideon, and the issue that I found is that Gideon without ECL is just not nearly as scary. He's undeniably the best 5-drop you can run for this deck. As a general list card over Super Commando is going to be better against aggro, but it's going to be a card that can be very useful. It's kind of a win more card. Like if your opponent doesn't deal with it, it's really amazing, but then if it does, it's not so great unless you're using it with ECL. But as I said many times, usually when you get to 5 resource, you usually prefer to keep ECL for Vader. So this is one of the downside of using Vader, is like Vader is so strong with ECL that it makes you think that every time you use ECL for something else than a Vader, it makes you feel like you're losing on a lot of value. I think against aggro that's a good thing to do, but against stuff like mid-range where you're very likely to draw a Vader, by the time you get to that resource point, it just feels bad to use ECL on Gideon most of the time. Okay, that's it for this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this deck. So overall, I think it's a deck that answers a really specific threat in the meta. It's really fun to play with, and I think it's if you're going to the Galactic Championship, this also should be like, I think, a deck that you should consider. I've seen some people putting some deck list of this. This is my personal version that I've been playtesting with Enigma, and I think it's very, very strong. So I think you should definitely consider, and that's the reason why I wanted to pick this as my first in-depth deck. The main kind of argument that I would put against this deck is, obviously, if you are in a meta where there's a lot of hard control deck, then you definitely do not want to run this. And also the problem, of course, is always going to be a problem that is impossible to solve, but that's the deployment on 6 on Gar Saxon. I honestly think that if Gar Saxon deployed on 5 with worse stat, obviously, if it was Gar Saxon was deploying as a 3-7 on 5, or even as a 3-6 on 5, I think it would actually be one of the strongest deck in the game. But it is, in my opinion, a very legit deck. And in my opinion, if you're a fan of Gar Saxon, in my opinion, it's the best way to run Gar Saxon by a long shot. Thank you so much for following that video. If you like the video, please leave a like and subscribe. And I'm also currently wearing the Enigma jersey, the Enigma hoodie that you can order on our Enigma store. So feel free to do so if you want to support us. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.